Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage, Mr. Benjamin Graham.
Hello, my name is Benjamin Big Mouth Ben Graham, and in a few minutes, I'll tell you how I got the name Big Mouth Ben. First, I'd like to thank Dr. Womack and Cornelius for allowing me to be a part of the Bottom to the Top tour. I'd like to share with you today my story in hopes of inspiring you that if you're going through something, if you're at what you call a bottom, that there's a God that will bring us out, and that you too can go from the bottom to the top. First, I'd like to start off with my childhood. There were two important seeds in my childhood that were planted. One, a spiritual seed. I grew up in the church. I was in church about 4 times a week. It was a holiness church, to be exact. I was raised by my grandmother. My mom was in school and wanted to finish her education. The second seed was entrepreneurship. At the age of 6, I witnessed a gentleman turn in empty Coke bottles. My eyes got that big. I said, "You gave him money for an empty bottle?" The cashier said, "Yes." I said, "I know where a lot of those bottles are." I ran home, grabbed my red wagon, and filled it with bottles. Took it back to the gas station and made $2. I bought $2 worth of bubble gum, and I sat in the woods and laughed. So spiritual seed and an entrepreneur seed. Now also in my childhood, I had a few childhood traumas that will later play a part of my mental illness and drug addiction. That seed was an evil seed. One day, while searching for bottles in the woods of North Carolina, I wandered onto the property of a man who said I was trespassing. Now, I'm raised to have good manners, so I tried to apologize and turn around and leave. But the man wouldn't let me leave. He forced me deeper in the woods, and as a result, I was molested at the age of 6. I also witnessed my grandfather abuse my grandmother. He suffered from alcoholism. And it seems like every time we went to church, grandmama got a beating when we got home. I became a little bitter. You know, I prayed and wondered why God would allow my grandmother to go through that. But later on in life, grandmother passed of a heart attack, and I came to live with my mom in Atlanta. In Atlanta, I would be exposed to a few more other childhood traumas, but for the most part, Mom stayed on us in our childhood, and we had a pretty ambitious childhood. Honor roll student, I worked hard and went off to college. Now, college is where these childhood traumas would play out. I noticed in college that I was that one that had to get sloppy drunk. You know, you ever got those friends that you go out with to drink, and there's always one that goes all the way, that one that you had to drag out the club, the one that you have to help them in the car? Well, I was that one. I didn't know that I was trying to medicate my childhood traumas. I did not know that I was trying to erase those woods of North Carolina. As college went on, being a hard worker and being ambitious, I was into music. By the way, our family has a musical talent. So I had a record out. I was rapping, DJing at the radio stations, at the club. I had a name Benji K back then, and I was popular. So along with that, I started to make some other mistakes. With just 4 quarters to go for a degree, I quit. I figured I was popular in music, I was about to blow up as a rapper, so why not quit school? Another major mistake. I often share with people, especially when I speak in schools, that education is an important foundation. So here I am, 4 quarters to go for a degree, and I'm on my way back to Atlanta. Of course, I didn't make it into the music when I first got back, so I had to go back to what I call an ordinary life, working to pay bills. My alcoholism grew. I drank while searching for a job. Matter of fact, wait a minute, let me tell y'all this. I quit all my jobs while in Athens. And by the way, I worked 5 part-time jobs while in school. 4 in the morning to 8, I worked at UPS. 9 to 1, I made biscuits at Bojangles. 2 to 5, I went to school, And from 6 to 10, I worked at McDonald's, and I DJ'd at the radio station from 10 to 12. So I was very ambitious, but when I got back to Atlanta, I could not find a job, and I became depressed. Drinking a fifth of liquor every day to medicate my mind. I finally got it together, and I got work with DeKalb County, and I started to work and get things together. Now, I was always an entrepreneur. Remember that kid that turned in those empty bottles? Well, I came up with another business idea. And this time it went well. I had money coming in the mail, money orders, checks, you name it. So I was doing real well. I decided to quit that job, once again, before I had my foundation built, and move out to the wealthy part of Atlanta, Buckhead. The family was proud of me. I had on a suit and tie, and Mom was so proud. But another thing happened. This was the early 90s. They came out with something called the internet. My business was not on the internet, nor did I want to go on the internet. It was new. Not everyone had computers, so I figured I was safe. But what I discovered is that all my customers were going online to buy their purchases. So I was about to go out of business. So I made another bad mistake. Wanting to keep that wealthy lifestyle, I decided to learn how to sell drugs. I happened to be producing a guy that was in music that was a big-time drug dealer. So in order not to leave Buckhead, I called him up. I said, hey man, teach me how to sell drugs. He was very reluctant because he figured I went to school, I had the training, why sell drugs? But I told him I was desperate. I wanted to live out in Buckhead, and besides I knew people that would buy the drugs. So I jumped into this business and took off. Now what was happening was, I didn't know it, but I was getting ready to enter what I call a funnel all the way to the bottom. When I made that decision, it was almost like snatching my hand away from the Lord. I figured that when I got into that, I started making so much money, I started to believe that I made the world go round. You see, I bought VIP memberships at every club in Atlanta. You couldn't tell me nothing. Even had thoughts of starting my own criminal empire. At this point, I'm away from the Lord, and I am doing what I want to do. I'm in my will, and I'm making the world go round. I'm wealthy, and I've got money to blow. But then something happened. All this in 3 months. 3 months later, they kicked my door in. They took my money away from me. They took my cars and took me to jail. It was my first offense, so I was given first offender. So I got back out, and I was able to try to sell on the side and move forward. But I always share with people, that wasn't my worst sentence. My worst sentence was 1 year later. Remember that kid that wanted to erase those memories? Remember the student that wanted to erase his past, those woods in North Carolina? Well, I was still that depressed person, even selling drugs. I knew I was wrong. I knew I didn't want to, and I was still drinking heavy. But my worst sentence was 1 year later, I took my first hit of crack cocaine. And when I did, it hit me like a brick. I said, what is this? I felt like that hit of crack would erase what was going on in my mind. I began to indulge more and more to the point where the guy that taught me the business didn't want anything to do with me. So he decided to cut me off. So now I'm using the drugs, trying to sell them. Eventually I couldn't sell anymore because I used them all. So my mom saw me when I first went into Buckhead as a businessman with a shirt and tie on. 1 year later, she would see her same son in a shirt that he had on for about a week, wandering the streets. I'll never forget that look. She looked at me. I was in the car with somebody. She said, get out the car. She took me home. And that, my friends, was the beginning of a 17-year drug addiction. I keep it together for a couple months, go out, go job hunting, get a job, get my first check, and relapse. And this would go on every few months. I would go back into the streets and stay in the streets for a few months and then go back home and try to get it together. I got to the point where I couldn't even work a full-time job. So I took work at a labor pool. This is where you go to work and they take you out that day, bring you back, and pay you. Well, they found a job for me, riding the back of a garbage truck. I loved that job. Did that job for a few years. And one day, while the guy was backing up, while I was on the back of the garbage truck, he bagged me into a dump truck, crushing my pelvis. The only thing connecting my top and bottom was the spinal cord. That injury put me in a wheelchair. Mary Jo Albert, I'll never forget that name, did the surgery and put a bar right here in the back of my back to connect my legs. 1 year later, with God's healing and determination, I got out of that wheelchair. I got my strength to walk again. Now, once I did, I took that same wheelchair and I put a cooler in it and started pushing the wheelchair around selling snacks. I gave myself a new name, Big Mouth Ben. And that meant, if you want to sell it, let me tell it. That was my marketing name, Big Mouth Ben. If you want to sell it, let me tell it. People would come from all over and put flyers on the wheelchair and advertise with me, paying me $15 a week. That went well. But as I got to walking around, I ended up again on 4th Street over here, relapsing and smoking crack. Pretty soon I was just pushing that wheelchair around to support my drug habit. Now I was still trying to survive. I designed a bike to get around faster, and that went well. But addiction would take me to my bottom at this point. Sleeping under the bridge, just down the street, 3 blocks from this store. I would be under that bridge for the next few years until one night I did what I call surrender. And not necessarily to the authorities. I did a more important surrender. I surrendered to God. The conversation went something like this. God, it's got to be more life than this. I went to school. I had a business. I was into the music. I know that you meant for me to have more than what I have now in life. And God spoke back. He said, it is more to life. I promise to love you wherever you want to be. And as soon as he said that, I felt this lift in my spirit. And at that point, I said, you know what? I wonder what life would hold for me if I was to move forward without the drugs. I started moving forward, and it wasn't easy. I mean, that same day, I think I found a bag full of drugs. It seems like when you want to do something, the enemy is right there to try to thwart your plans. But one thing that stayed with me my whole journey was determination. I remained determined. Now, I was forced to go through a program, and at this point, I was ready. I went through the program with flying colors. I was their most improved client. I called back home to my mom at this point. My mom had never seen me sober for more than a couple months. Now I'm sober for about a year, and I called Mom and said, Mom, I'm going to graduate from the program. They chose me to speak, and I'd like for you to be there when I do. Mom was so excited. She was in North Carolina and decided to come to Georgia to see her baby speak at his graduation from the drug treatment program. Mom came down on that Thursday. We had dinner. We spent time together. We were excited. Mom said, I can't wait to see my baby walk that stage and tell this story on stage. Saturday morning, I got a phone call. Mom had a heart attack. Our family rushed to the hospital, and I walked into this room, and they had all types of tubes going in and out my mom, and she was non-responsive. I didn't know what to do. We prayed, we ate, and we left the hospital. The doctor said it would be best if we give her space. So we came back Sunday. Sunday I didn't feel well, so I did what I was supposed to do in recovery, and that's go to a meeting. I went to a meeting, and as soon as I shared about how I was feeling, I got that phone call from my brother saying Mom didn't make it. She passed away. Now, the first thing that went through my head was anger. I was so upset with myself for not getting sober soon enough. But the most assuring thing is that my mom saw me sober before she left here. I didn't let that stop me. I started moving forward. And a couple years later, well, actually 1 year later, I discovered my calling and my purpose in life. And that's to do what I'm doing today. Inspire people. To share with people that they too can come out their bottom. I decided to make that bike that I was riding around selling snacks yellow. And the yellow represents the sunshine. My goal is to brighten people's life. Another good thing happened a couple years in recovery. I was reunited with my college sweetheart. Back when I was at UGA, I met the love of my life. And when I decided to quit school, we lost touch with each other for 24 years. But 2 years in recovery, we found each other on social media. If y'all could only been to that first date. The first date, I told her everything that I'd been through. I was working honesty, and I was going to be honest because I wanted her to decide whether she wanted to deal with me or not. So she did one thing that scared me to death. She said, you know what, I got to use the restroom. And she got up from that table and went to the restroom, and all I'm thinking is that she's going out the back door. But she didn't. She stayed, we got engaged, and we got married. So one day while riding, I came up with a route on my yellow bicycle, selling my snacks in and out of barbershops, parks, apartment complexes. The kids loved that yellow bike. They saw the new bin, the sober bin, riding around, selling the snacks, inspiring people, doing music. I came across a sign for rent, and it was right here on Auburn Avenue. I got the number. I called my fiance at the time, and I said, baby, they got a for rent sign in this window. I was a little nervous, but Tanya was all about it. She said, look, you don't get this opportunity much in that neighborhood. So we called a broker, and God's favor followed us the whole step. We went through the application process, and the owner of the building said, I got a good feeling about you too. Can you imagine? Where can you go and get a commercial lease based on a good feeling about you too? Well, she gave us a chance, and as a result, from journeying from my bottom to the top, we're standing in Big Mouth Ben stores, the store that my wife and I own, 2 blocks from the bridge I slept under. So I'm Benjamin Big Mouth Ben Graham. I'm a part of this wonderful Bottom to the Top tour, and I'm telling you that you too can go from the bottom to the top. Before I leave, I want to leave you with 3 things. The most important thing is you have to surrender. You have to surrender. And once you surrender, you have to be willing to make the sacrifices. And once you make the sacrifices, you just have to stay determined. My theme throughout my journey was dreams ahead, proceed with determination. I'm Benjamin Big Mouth Ben Graham, and I went from the bottom to the top, and I came from nothing. Thank you.
The Bottom to the Top tour is not a moment, it is a movement. If you've been inspired by the powerful testimonies of the speakers that you have heard today, you have an opportunity to have your own copy of the new soon-to-be-released book, Testify. You don't want to miss the opportunity to read through the details of the stories, the trials, the challenges, and the triumphs of the 12 speakers featured on the Bottom to the Top Tour Atlanta. If you would like to bring the Bottom to the Top Tour to your local city and your local town, please dial 1-866-686-5836. Again, the Bottom to the Top Tour, not a moment, it's a movement.